Well, winter bird feeding is a wonderful hobby, and for those of you who already feed birds in your yard, now's a good time to go ahead and clean up your feeders. What you want to do is just wash those off in a soapy solution and then rinse them off in a 10% solution of Clorox and water. Well, for those of you who may be first-time homeowners or bird feeders, I want to go over a few of the tips on how to select bird feeders and also how to select the feed that will attract the kind of birds you want in your yard. Well, first off, tube feeders are very good feeders. They're good because they attract smaller birds like finches and pine siskins, and you don't get a lot of seed waste with these feeders. The feeder that I have here is a sturdy construction. It's also got some little perches for the birds to sit on, and you'll notice here how the holes of the feeder have a metal rim on them so that the squirrels can't get in and tear up your bird feeder. Now the holes in this feeder are larger so they can feed bird seed out of it. But if you want to attract just finches and very small birds who like thistle seed, you can actually get a tube feeder that has smaller holes in it, and that's for the thistle seed. Now you'll notice this wire cage on the outside, that's also for squirrel protection, and they again have a perch, and you still will get some waste from this, but you can also buy a tray that goes on the bottom of the feeder, and that will help reduce some of the waste. Well, you notice I've already said quite a bit about protection from squirrels, and squirrels actually can be a problem when you're feeding birds. And one of the things that you can do to kind of foil the squirrels from getting your bird feed is to get a baffle. Now this is a baffle that was actually made for this feeder, and it just goes on the top, and the squirrels will land on this and slide off. They can't come and get on the feeder. Well, I know some people that actually use LP vinyl records and put those on the top, and those work just as well as a baffle. Well, now if you're really determined not to feed the squirrels, you can get one of these high dollar models. These are probably going to go for $50 and up. And how this works is that the weight of the squirrel will actually cut the food off from the squirrel. So if you really are determined not to feed squirrels, you might want to invest in something like this. Well, these bird feeders are good for the smaller birds, but if you like larger birds like cardinals and blue jays, you might want to think about getting a hopper feeder or a platform feeder. Now you'll have a little bit more of seed waste, but that's okay because there are also birds that like to eat on the ground, so they can go ahead and eat that seed that falls on the ground. Another thing to think about when you have the feeders is get one that's clear so that you can see when the seed is going down. Well, one final type of feeder are suet feeders, and this is just a metal cage, and what you want to look for with these is that it's covered with vinyl, because just as metal doesn't feel very good to us in the winter, it doesn't feel very good to the birds either. Now what you put in here is actually called suet, and it's just a mixture of fat and seeds and other things that are in here, and woodpeckers like this a lot. Now you don't want to start feeding suet until it gets really cold outside, because otherwise it will go rancid in the heat. Well, I talked about different kinds of bird feeders, but different kinds of birds also like different seed. Now the small goldfinches and pine siskins like the thistle seed. That's their favorite, but this is kind of expensive. So you can also go to the black oil sunflower seed and get that, and that will be good for a wide range of birds, but it's not quite as expensive. Now the sorghum and the millet are good for the birds that like to feed on the ground, like mourning doves. Finally, you can find a mix that's made up for wild birds, but I would recommend that you buy each of the seeds individually and make your own mix, because the mix in here is also something that's nice to sparrows and starlings. So go ahead and make your own mix. Finally, when feeding birds, you need to think about water. Now we know birds need water in the summer because it's hot, but it's even more important to them in the winter. And while they drink it, the most important part about water is that it keeps them clean, and that will help the birds to stay warm in the winter. Thing you need to remember about the water source is make sure it's clean, and you'll want to get a bird bath heater. Get one that will turn off when the water gets to about 40 degrees so that you don't have a bird whirlpool going here, but just so that it'll keep the ice off. Well, all of these tips that I've shown you today are actually available in a book by the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. You can send them $2 to the address on your screen, and they'll send you a book on attracting birds to your yard. Well, finally, if you're a first-time bird feeder and you don't notice a whole lot of birds this winter, keep with it, because it actually takes the birds some time to figure out where the food is. But it's well worth your while if you'll stick to it year after year, because you'll develop a great new hobby.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.